Okay, so we're in
Okay.
overtime.
When you talk about Google, you just this teaser about pornography and sex differences. I don't know where that came from, but
That
I'm
was
gonna
my
like listen to the
marketing.
Google. I was
Those
gonna
are my
listen to the
marketing
Google thing
instincts.
and keep going like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, you get to the porn.
Yeah. Well, which do you want me to start with?
The
You're
porn.
you're a male. I have a prediction.
So yeah. Okay, go ahead. So what are we talking about here?
Well, first of all, okay, so we both subscribe to, I think, certain foundational ideas in evolutionary psychology. One is that there is just some genetic basis for differences between male and female sexual and romantic psychology, which isn't to say there isn't huge variation in both populations. It isn't to
Yep.
say that in both cases, environmentally experience can be formative and important and shape things and so on. All the qualifiers.
Yep.
Still, the logic from Darwinian theory is so clear cut and does seem to comply with expectations. And in fact, patterns of pornography consumption in various societies have been used as evidence because they are consistent with the idea. The fact that overwhelmingly, if by pornography you mean the sheer like visual presentation of flesh, like not some kind of novel with a complicated plot, but the surely visual stuff is overwhelmingly a male market. I mean, when they started Playgirl magazine, they thought finally something for women. It turned out only gay men bought it, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and however, there is a genre of female of porn that women are more likely like, and it tends to involve more in the way of psychological dynamics and so on, and maybe actual affection. But anyway, you might say that traditionally, uh, you know, the reason. Well, let me just say that once you've got sex bots that can talk and the ratio of romance to sex can be whatever you desire, and they can have infinitely complex personalities and can be your friends, you would think that according to both stereotype and some actual ideas from evolutionary psychology, some of this would be more appealing to many women than traditional pornography has been, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The crude generalization, which of course admits of a lot of variation and everything, is that men are drawn to sort of explicit sexual depictions, women more towards romance. And a lot of the sort of pornography for women, in scare quotes, involves sexual interactions that have a story behind them and have romance that have some sort of human connection. So the audience for romance novels, it used to be Harlequin romance, is predominantly female, just like the audience for hardcore pornography is not exclusively, but largely male. And then you bring AI into the mix, and you guess your point is you could have an AI boyfriend or a robot boyfriend that scratches the itches of female heterosexuals, and maybe does a better job than what sex bots could do for males.
Yeah. And, I remember there was, I saw some paper, I don't know to what extent it was borne out long ago, on a literature of rape fantasies that has a mainly female audience. And and it said there was a particular like nature to them, like it ended well. And it was like, I don't remember it that clearly, but the idea was, there's some resistance, but in any event, the guy falls in love with her and it's happily ever, some impressive guy rides in on horseback. I don't know the whole thing, but the argument was that there is, and this isn't to say that all women have this fantasy at all, but there was a kind of, anyway, the point is there's all these contours that, may or may not be part of differences between male and female psychology. I will say that I'm a lot more worried about some male rape fantasies finding endless realization in virtual reality than I am about what women will find themselves latching onto. I mean, I think that could get pretty dark and bad.
So two things. One thing is, you're right, and it's one of the great puzzles. It's not what anybody would have expected, but we know a lot about what people want from what people's sexual fantasies and what they want, because places like Pornhub have made available their search data, and you can get some indication based on internet magic whether the person doing the search is male or female, how old they are, whether they're gay or straight or bi or whatever. And one of the huge surprises is that searches for violent pornography are much more common in women than men. It's, if I had to predict, I would have predicted the opposite. 100% men are far more aggressive, da, da, da. It's not clear why. I mean, one thing is that we often fantasize or think about what we're most in danger of as a way to think about it and domesticate it. And it's a huge puzzle. But I want to get to the second part. Why? Maybe you think it's obvious, but why are you so worried about male violent sex fantasies being played out in AI pornography?
Well, I mean, it's funny. I was reading your draft, which you haven't published, and you ultimately got to the kind of brain in a vat question like, if everything is fantasy, though, is that good? And you were like, no, but you couldn't articulate a reason, at least to my satisfaction.
I do that in another Substack.
but anyway, that's partly the way I feel here. It's just like, this is not the best part of human nature. The whole idea of, true, these are not stories that end well. Right. Yeah. Like with the guy, the ones I'm worried about are not ones that end happily ever after. Yeah. They're ones where, no, the woman wasn't happy about the experience. Yeah. Yeah. And God knows, I mean, look, what kinds of fantasies these will be mingled in terms of like fighting with males over the whatever, choose your adventure. But I'm not optimistic that some of this won't be a pretty dark combination of violence and sexual violence.
So there's two kinds of worries you could have. One kind of worry is participation in these fantasies, and people do this now, of course. People fantasize, there's regular pornography, will make people worse in the real world, will make people more violent.
I was about to get to that. Yeah.
Or you might be arguing, even if that's not true, there's something intrinsically wrong about gratifying that unpleasant part of us. And the same thing, by the way, comes in people's discussions about child sex dolls for people with pedophilic instincts. Right. Which is, some people, including me, say it's an empirical question. If having sex with these child sex dolls makes people more likely to attack real children, absolutely, it's the worst thing in the world. If it makes them less likely to, then it's a good thing. Yeah. But then there's people who say they shouldn't do that at all, even if there's nobody.
And then there's, in the second category, if we assume it doesn't manifest itself in the real world, then would you say that if there was still something wrong with them using pictures of real children, is there anything wrong with them using deep fakes of real children? And I can see the case for, like, yes, it's there's that, but the I mean, well, I can certainly see the case saying it's much worse. Just to be clear, it's much worse to have pictures of real children because there were real children you had to take the pictures of. But on the question of playing out in the real world, I mean, I remember this, Ed Wilson, a lot of people in evo-psych, including me, kind of, think that although he originally, was treated as some kind of founder of the field, he didn't really get all the nuance of what became evolutionary psychology. There's all kinds of arguments about that. But I do remember, I think in his book On Human Nature, which was published in 1979, he distinguished between the so-called drive-discharge hypothesis, that you do fake violence and get it out of your system, then you're less likely to do it in the real world, and the idea that, no, it's just positive reinforcement for a behavior that is now more likely to be acted out in the real world. My suspicion in the case of violent video games and gun violence and mass shootings has always been that some of these mass shootings must have been done by people who kept getting the thrill reinforced in video games. Certainly, some of these guys did play violent video games, but I don't know. Is there? This has not been resolved, right, as an academic matter?
It has not been resolved. There's some very bad studies where, you get kids to play a violent video game and then you test their aggression 2 minutes later and you find it goes up. I guess what I find most convincing as an argument against that claim is that in the last 20 years in the United States, focus United States, there's been an enormous rise, both in the accessibility of hardcore pornography and in the accessibility and use of violent video games. This 20-year period, 30-year period, has corresponded with a sharp drop of both violent crimes and sexual crimes. The drop has changed.
But an increase in mass shootings, right?
I don't know. I've heard different things about that. I've heard that, but maybe a lot depends on how you code it. There may well have been an increase in mass shootings, but then I find these are such rare cases, and causality could go both ways. If you're the kind of kid who collects guns and would shoot up a school, you're probably the kind of kid who would play, violent games, video games.
Yeah, it's hard to do the causality, but I would say that, yeah, the violent crime thing I think is kind of another kettle of fish. You're talking about people who, do robbery, mug people, point a gun at them, and so on. And I wouldn't imagine that that's the kind of thing you're reinforcing with video games, A, and B, that is subject to so many other things, like just the fact that we all now carry smartphones. We can report crimes right away. There's video, there's more surveillance cameras and so on. But there's a... So anyway, there's that. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
And I had thought, and maybe your commenters would respond, but I had thought that there's a lot of evidence against the view that the accessibility of pornography increases sexual crimes. That the connection doesn't seem to happen. I'm not sure if there's an argument in the other side. I'm not sure if people would say that, it diminishes it due to some sort of cathartic release. But my sense is that there's that. It used to be thought, oh my God, if you have Playboy and Penthouse, and later on, if you have the internet, there's going to be this mass increase in rapes, and that has never happened.
Yeah, although of course Playboy and Penthouse didn't do, except in the most modestly suggestive and implicit way, didn't do even like bondage and stuff.
The original argument against pornography was that it would lead to, and I don't think it's crazy that it would lead to sort of negative feelings towards women. Even if the pornography wasn't itself violent, that is dehumanizing and objectifying.
Yeah. At the same time, I think there's a separate kind of concern, which is that are males less likely to invest in heterosexual males less likely to invest in relationships with actual heterosexual females. It's like, if part of what they're after is so easy to get and is going to be increasingly realistic, and it's challenging to get it in the real world, not that that's the only thing that males are after. It kind of varies by situation, whether it is. But and in fact, one thing that worries me is it's not all they're after, but it may be something they can only get in the real world. So
there's a very deep question, which is here about evolution, which is, and psychology. We've been wired up to respond, to go for, we've been wired to be attracted to people who we could have children with. We could attract to people who, particularly for women who have status and power, who have kindness, who have all these sort of traits. But because we can't directly access these goals, we go for sort of cues to them. So a pretty symmetrical face, big muscles in a man, a certain deep, whatever it is. And the idea is, if you have the cues and fully consciously that it isn't connected to the real thing, does that still work? And the answer is, to some extent, of course, yes, because men can become aroused by pornographic images, even though they full well know they're just looking at images on the computer screen. And the question is, how far can you put it? Would a woman whose mind has been evolved to be drawn towards a man who has kindness and intelligence and status and physically fit, fall in love with an AI boyfriend that she knows full well has
Yeah.
none of those things, but gives the impression of it.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
we'll find out.
Yeah. And I think that's why the extent to which women will be drawn into this realm is more of an open question than with men, although there is the question of whether men will be drawn into like romantic relationships in the metaverse.
Yes.
And these, that's an open question. There can be no doubt that the sheer pornographic element will become more realistic and probably more intriguing because of how complexly it's gamified.
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions here. One question is the sort of AI boyfriends, girlfriends that we have now and would have much better 5 years from now. How many of them will draw people away from real human contact? And then the question, which sadly I think is easier, which is once we have sex bots and robot boyfriends, robot girlfriends, we ever get to that point, I think that definitely will draw people away from all of the effort and work and struggle of getting a real thing.
And, a global population is already tapering off faster than had been anticipated. There was a story about this in the Wall Street Journal last week. We've long known that as countries modernize, their GDP grows, the birth rate falls off. But it's like happening around the world faster than that data alone would have suggested based on like GDP in these various places. And, already, I mean, the millennials and I assume some is it Zers? Yeah. Are they, in a certain demographic within millennials, there's this idea that would you want to bring kids into this world, what with climate change and everything? And anyway, I would think that the metaverse may only accelerate the decline in population.
There's kind of an irony here. When I was young, and actually when my kids were young, everyone, all the old people, would complain that the kids are having too much sex, they're drinking too much, they're driving, they're getting in all sorts of trouble. Now we're all in this panic because they're not having sex. They don't get licenses. They don't drink. They don't take drugs. What's wrong with them?
Don't they take drugs? Don't they?
Oh, they do take drugs. That's true. At least Adderall.
Well, yeah, but they take party drugs. They take
yes, they
take
do
ecstasy and vitamin K.
Maybe that's why they drink so much less.
Yeah, they take psychedelics more, I think.
Yes,
which is
but they don't screw. They don't take. Obviously, your mileage may vary, and there's different people listening. No, I do, but a lot less.
That's shocking because the dating apps, in principle, make it so easy. Oh, that's the other thing I've heard is like there was somebody who got some woman who's editor of some media site that talks about these things said that suggested we may move into a world where your AI, your bot, talks to the bots of other eligible people. So this is an extension of the dating app. It's just that you have your AIs talk to each other and you figure out whether you'd like each other and so on.
I've been told now it's creepy to approach men or women in bars and restaurants in the real world. Many young people think it's absolutely creepy and kind of disgusting. You can approach them through apps. The next stage would be, it's disgusting to approach them through apps. You should have your AI representative make the first move.
Right. How dare you?
Yes.
I hadn't heard that, but it doesn't surprise me. Look, in many ways, I'd have rather grown up in this world. I was not the kind to confidently approach women in a singles bar.
I remember hearing a happily married professor or whatever, and heard a young student of mine, a male student, describe Tinder. And I'm like, you do what? How, and like, oh my God, I was born in the wrong time.
Yeah.
For a 17-year-old, a 19-year-old guy, it would have been, and a lot of things. I nostalgia time, but I'm old enough to remember that when 11 o'clock rolled around and the TV would go off and there'd be nothing to watch and you can't contact your friends. It's too late to phone people. So if you're at home, it's a school night, you gotta read.
That was terrible.
And now the world's a lot more interesting.
In America, they used to play the national anthem when TV would go off like around midnight or 1 or whatever. They'd play the Star Spangled Banner. It's a very stirring moment. So yeah. Now Google, I guess what I was going to say, there is. So first of all, they did show that basically they're not far behind OpenAI on these various things, and of course they're ahead of them on some things. And I don't know, I don't give stock advice, but I still think Google is very well positioned in this race when you look at how many platforms they have to roll stuff out on, and the research talent and so on. But one thing they're doing is, their search, they're going the Perplexity route, right? That's the one thing they announced last week. They're going to now have, you can ask a question, you get the short answer, and I gather it will have a few links, which must be the hard part because your generic large language model doesn't give you sources. And media sites are worried. They won't steer traffic to you anymore. I think in some ways it may be for the better, but which I can explain. But do you have a take on this, or you happy about this?
It seems to me that our topics there's a common theme here, which is AI as mediator or buffer, so that you don't reach out to potential dates. You have your AI do it for you. Elon Musk said it so that Twitter does not link in any convenient way to many news sites. And now this new Google thing means you write an article with, this wonderful analysis of the Ukraine situation. Somebody asks what's happening in Ukraine. AI will provide them with a summary of your article without connecting to you in any simple way. And so I can see why news people would be in a panic over this.
Now, I think the claim is that if they really are using you as a direct source, they will link to you. And I'm not even sure whether it's they go out and find a direct source and link to it, or they do the LLM answer and then go, well, what's out there that's the closest to something that corroborates what we just said? And if they can't find anything, maybe they delete part of what they just said. I don't know. But
the old AI, if you say, name some problems of empathy, will link to my book. And that's, you see my book. Oh, click on my book. The new AI will give an answer, I assume. And then say, oh, you want to learn more, link to this, and then give a link no one will ever click to.
Well, was it a fact that if you said, what are some problems with empathy? I mean, you've done this experiment, possibly every night you do it. I don't know, but.
No, I haven't, but I'm assuming I'd be on the top of the search.
You probably would be. See, I think, to me, like with my newsletter stuff, it probably doesn't matter. We get traffic from Google, but I'm assuming most of it is people looking for specific articles that, like, I've plugged on a video or something. I mean, I can't believe, that if you ask a question about Ukraine, we're in the top 10, 20. I mean, it helps that we're on Substack. I think that helps your Google search results to have a Substack URL a little. But I think it could be good in the sense that, first of all, it's funny that people are saying, oh, they're going to use like AI to generate this search summary, but AI hallucinates. Well, of course, first of all, if you look at the first 10 links Google gives you to the average question, several of them will have something factually wrong in them, I mean, a ton of it misinformation. The problem for Google is that it didn't get blamed for that, but it will get blamed for this. But I think, in a way, that may be good. If in other words, if instead of just 10 links, you get a summary that has 3 links, but Google has chosen them so it's willing to stand behind them because its brand is at stake, that may be a better world than what we're getting now. I don't know.
Also, Google, I don't know when this started. Maybe this has been a long-standing problem, but because of either search engine optimization or paid ads, you type in Air Canada to Google, the first link is not Air Canada. The first link is some other airline or something that does the same thing. You type in ChatGPT, it's like the 6th link down. And ahead of it is, AI, powerful AI things.
And those are those ads?
I'm not sure.
I think often they are.
Maybe they're ads. Sometimes they're people, they're search. Sometimes if you're looking for something obscure, you'll just get a bigger thing that is more connected to Google.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Google right now, what are some problems with empathy? How do you want me to phrase the question?
What are some criticisms of empathy?
Empathy. First one is that bad books get written about it. Just kidding, Paul.
Yeah.
Let's
Bad
see.
Substacks too.
What's the matter with empathy? The Greater Good Science Center. Now, some of these may be places that I know that who runs that. You know who runs the Greater Good Science Center?
Is that Dacker Keltner?
You got it.
Smart guy.
Psychologist at Berkeley. So I'm going to click the first three. I mean, I'm trying to.
I didn't mean to invite an exercise in humiliation.
Now, against empathy, on the Wikipedia article against empathy, which I think is about your book, is like the 8th something or something. The biggest.
Yeah. That book was written a while ago. I'm fine with it being 8th.
Yeah. Oh, and the first one mentions your book. You're getting this is good for you. This is good.
This has been good. This is good.
The second one mentions your book prominently. All the links mention your book. This is
okay.
You should bemoan the transition to the new system, Paul.
Yeah. Also, when I type in small potatoes, I honestly just get a lot of things about small potatoes, like potatoes
about a
that
rabbi
are small.
Suing a psychologist
No.
for intellectual property theft by any chance.
Probably. I think non-zero, I think is a genius search engine thing on your part, because I'm going to try this now since we're playing this game, typing in simply non-zero.
One word.
And I get the first real hit after the definition is your book. The second you are lucky. The second real hit is your newsletter. The third one is the Wikipedia page about your book.
Mm-hmm.
That cannot be better. That is something.
I'm even ahead of the Stephen Wolfram's Math World. But I digress. I'm not the type to really dwell on these things.
No, neither one of us cares about such things.
So what else?
A lot of people quit AI. You had a podcast about this.
I wrote about it, and also there's the last podcast got into it at the beginning. So first, Ilya Sutskever resigned. He's a chief scientist, a co-founder, and he was co-head of the so-called super alignment team, which is like visionary alignment, like the longest term thinking about alignment, the most ambitious projects to like align these coming AIs with human interests and values. But he was like nice about it. I love this place. I'm confident that they'll build good and safe AI. But then almost immediately, this guy, Jan Leike, who was the co-head of Super Alignment, along with Ilya Sutskever, just tweeted, "I resigned." That was it. No period even. Much less like, love these people, sorry to go.
That's how I'm going to leave my academic job. I'm just go for it.
you get more publicity that way. Do not include the period. Do not include the period. This was a genius move by him.
You're not going to reward them with a period.
Right. No, it's more of a slap in the face without the period. And then he followed that up by saying what people suspected he felt. We weren't getting the resources. So, you could say petty dispute over resources because, to do the stuff they want, that Super Alignment wants to do, you need a ton of compute. They want to like build and train and test these models. And so anyway, there was that. But also there was like, I forget something about, they've lost the concern about risk has been subordinated to the quest for the next shiny project or something. That phrase was in their next shiny project. And there had been another OpenAI safety guy who had quit not that long ago and was explicit about why. Now, and then it became a scandal that apparently OpenAI, when people leave, if they want to get the stock benefits they've earned, or the equivalent of stock benefits, they have to sign these incredibly stifling agreements that preclude ever criticizing anybody. Now, it was such a scandal. For the rest of
their life, ever.
Yeah, but Sam Altman says, that was a mistake. We're going to change it. Don't worry. People can say whatever they want. That was a little mini scandal. The thing I assume OpenAI would say in their defense, if they wanted to get into this, is look, the alignment people, and especially the super alignment people, are a very special breed. Like their P-doom was like 50%. They're terrified, they're scared, they think no amount of resources is sufficient. So of course, they're going to be a hard group to please. That would be the OpenAI response. And it's not crazy.
I mean, an analogy to an analogy which is very topical is sometimes people in diversity people at the university, DEI people resign.
Right.
I know of a few cases where they resign.
That's right.
And what they say is this university is not paying enough attention and devoting enough resources to DEI research, to DEI enforcement and what I take seriously. One could then take this as saying, oh my God, they're whistleblowers. They're turning out that the university is not putting resources into this. But another way to look at it is these are the very people who, by almost by definition, take this issue extremely seriously, more seriously than anyone else would take it.
Right. Google got into a little of this kind of trouble. Like they hired some of these ethics people. Like, okay, hold our feet to the fire. We really want you to do that. And then some of them like really did it, and they're like, no, you're fired. That's right. And they may be right that these people were overdoing it. I don't know. There was one case in particular I'm thinking of, not the Blake Lemoine case, which was kind of eccentric.
So I'm going to ask you this, because I'm not sure I've ever asked you this. Maybe you've commented on this before, but since this is the paid subscriber only, you could reveal this. And I understand this is how people who are dating in Silicon Valley begin, but what's your P-doom?
That is a great opening line. I have two questions. Haven't I seen you somewhere before? And also, what's your P-doom?
Yeah. I'm sure I've saw you. I remember you talking about your P-doom before.
Yeah. Haven't I seen your P-doom somewhere before?
That's true.
It's such an ill-defined question because it turns out, they don't mean quite human extinction usually. They don't have to mean actual human extinction. It's just something super catastrophic. Well, at that point, it gets pretty fuzzy. And so they have these ways of describing it that, I don't know, that.
And then there's a time horizon. But you actually asked the guy you were interviewing last podcast.
Right. His name is Liron Shapira. He's a Pause AI advocate. He's like the guy out there with a bullhorn standing in front of OpenAI with a couple dozen other people. Yeah.
And here's how either you or he defined it. It's that by the year 2040, 15 years from now, either humans will be extinct or we will be suffering some sort of fate worse than death.
Is that that's what he said,
that. Or you said it, or something really. So either total extinction or plainly a catastrophic event where most humans are dead or enslaved by AIs.
Yeah,
let's go for that.
I see. The thing is, most of my concerns are not the robots take over the world concern. Although I'm sorry to say I cannot yet confidently dismiss that. Part of that podcast conversation with him was to interrogate him, to get him to clarify, like, what is the case for that kind of doom? How exactly does it unfold? And I haven't yet heard a compelling version. But at the same time, the more I think about it, the more I think we can't rule out something about that catastrophic. But my concern is really more about just, if you look at the various ways this will be destabilizing, if not handled very wisely. We've described some of them that are kind of social and cultural. There's the job displacement. There's the bad actors creating new kinds of like hacking weapons that maybe take out all of our satellites or something. There's, new forms of crime. Bioweapons, development. I mean, if you look at all of these things, and you imagine this unfolding in an arms race environment at these various levels. First of all, corporations competing viciously to get ahead of each other, but more consequentially, nations feeling very competitively toward one another, threatened by one another. Then I just think it you go through a very, very bad period. And, of something a lot of chaos and dislocation and a certain amount of death and social collapse. And I worry that to the extent that there is plausibility to these AI takeover scenarios, that context makes it more likely. But it's bad in its own right. Leave aside AI takeover. Yeah. Massive death and suffering is bad in its own right.
Yeah.
And nuclear weapons could get it, we get blind, the satellites get taken out, we're blinded, you start thinking that the other side has launched the nuclear weapon. I mean, there's all kinds of bad things can happen.
So good. So let me reframe, because you're right in this. I don't want to collapse into P-doom. Lots of us dying, say, in a nuclear war where AI plays some role in making the nuclear weapons more destructive, or a pandemic where the AI plays some role in synthesizing deadlier biological weapons. I mean, AI takeover of the sort Yudkowsky worries about, or your guy worries about. What number would you put on that?
It's so hard. I'm really trying to get to the bottom of it. I guess that happening within 100 years.
I said less, like 25 years, say. 100 years is just, who knows?
Well, let's say 25. I'd put a very low probability on that. 50, I'd probably go up to 5%. I don't know.
Okay. So 25, like less than 1%?
I don't know. It's very hard to think about, much less than 5%. But who knows? I mean, it's like Bill Gates said, we tend to overestimate what will happen in the near term and underestimate what will happen and how big the change will be in the long term. Yeah. And he may have put numbers on it, like underestimate 1 year, or overestimate 1 year, underestimate 10 years. But with things moving this fast, 25 years is a long time. And remember, the whole singularity scenario, right, is the AI starts accelerating the rate of its own evolution. That's already happening in a certain sense. It's not cloning itself. It's not designing new versions of itself, but they are using AI in the development of the new models. And in fact, I gather, I haven't really fleshed this out, but Anthropic, which is one of the most safety-minded of the three frontier model creators, the others being OpenAI and Google, apparently some of the fine-tuning, which is conventionally known as reinforcement learning through human feedback, because humans do it, but I gather that some of their fine-tuning is done by AI, is done by a large language model. And I think maybe they think that is safer. You can kind of see it, but also the AI is facilitating chip design. It's facilitating the writing of computer code, of programming, which is involved in the development of AI. So this is already happening, and there's no reason to think that the rate at which it happens does not increase. I mean, especially in the absence of any kind of, international agreements that maybe we should slow this thing down, which I think we should, ideally.
And which there's no danger of stopping it.
You're not going to stop this.
No.
But I think slowing it down might be. Are you closer to agreeing that all other things being equal, if there were a magical way to cut the velocity of change in half, maybe it would be a safer world 10 or 20 years from now?
I would agree. Yeah, I definitely agree that would make the world safer. The problem, so that's not the problem. Like, I don't know, my P-doom, I thought about it, what we're talking is 4%, because 5% seems too high. And I don't know what to make of these.
Wait, if this is in 50 years?
50 years. But I don't, these numbers are, but so plainly AI involves threats. And there's the whole P-doom, robots take over the world threat. There's also all sorts of other threats. It undermines democracy. It causes foments social hatred. It's used as a weapon by bad actors. But you got to balance it against it, which is why I'm not somebody who says to stop it with I don't know, be wonderful. The potential benefits of
Wait, is that your coinage? P wonderful?
Yeah, damn it. That's my coinage.
Don't you think you should go with a D, like P delightful, or P? If there's a P that starts with do, let's see. P, do we not love this? No. P.
Darling. P delicious.
P delicious.
P delicious. so I have now the problem is deliciousness, unlike doom, doesn't have an absolute measure. But where are we going to be 5 years from now if AI cures Alzheimer's? What do we think of that? That's not pretty nice. If it looks at all the medical journals and says, plainly the cure is this.
Yeah. No, I got to admit, man, I'm open to life extension at this point. I just want to go on record, Paul. If anybody ever asks you how I feel about the possibility of the aging process in my body halting immediately, tell them I'm in favor of that. I've thought about it.
I'll go for a bit of reversal, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to go all the way back to high school. That was pretty unpleasant. Of course, high school would be great now. Dating apps, metaverse.
Sex bots.
Sex bots. Sign me up.
So I like the way you frame it, because that's what I want to. I thought I was worried you'd say, oh, I can't wait for the time when it could upload me up to the whatever and some sort of scene. I don't want to get uploaded. I don't believe my personal identity preserves. I want this guy to live. Yeah. It's like there's a great line from one of Woody Allen's books where he says, I don't want to be immortal because my ideas live on in the minds of others. I want to be immortal by not dying. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of I'm on the other hand, face it, strictly speaking, you don't know that you aren't already a brain in a vat.
I know.
And you're loving it. You just said, I want it to be like this. Well, for all you know, Paul,
I know.
You're just a brain in a fucking vat. Deal with it. Face it. You're living in a dream world by denying this. And also in the sense that you're a brain in a vat.
David Chalmers, your friend, your co-discoverer of the philosophical zombie argument, has argued that if we're brains in a vat of a certain sort, it doesn't really matter. And a certain sort, I think he's talking about, which is that if it's just me and you're an illusion, everybody else illusion, that's awful. That's horrible. Right. But if we're both brains in a vat and we're just kind of communicating, that's okay. That's fine.
No, it gets back to in the metaverse, are you getting the joy out of playing the game with other human beings who are in it?
Yeah.
Or can you get the joy out of playing with other beings that aren't human and are not sentient but are in it?
That is a deep and important question.
It's a deep and important question. Those are the kinds of questions we happen upon when we talk, Paul.
It's a natural place to end, I think, although we should remind people to send us questions, to send us
money. Oh, questions too. Yes.
That's right. Yes, to subscribe, to become paid subscribers and small potatoes in a non-zero newsletter.
Possibly both. But quickly, we did promise we'd say something about TV, so we must say something about TV.
One recommendation, this show, Dark Matter, and you would like it. It's science fiction. I don't want to give away too much, and don't watch the trailer because the trailer gives away so much.
I hate that.
But the one-liner is it's sort of an everyman and he finds himself in an alternative universe scenario. And that's all I'll give you. But it's well done. It's well, good dialogue, good sets, nice action scenes. It's well done. And you are, I heard you say, going through the Chinese version of the three-body problem.
Beautifully. We've now watched
all 30 episodes. 9
of 30 episodes. I don't think we'll make it all the way. It's perfectly fine. I mean, it's interesting because I think the trouble is it's a little slow sometimes, and I think the reason for that is I assume they said, like, can we get a whole series out of the? I mean, I think maybe in China. Remember back in the day, maybe you're too young for this, but back when these people in TV were hardworking and didn't put out like an 8-episode streaming series and then say, well, maybe we'll get around to season 2 before you die, and maybe not. Okay. They would do like, I don't know, I think originally they did 40 episodes a year, and then summer was 3 months of reruns, and then it got smaller. Anyway, my theory is that in China they said it's like 30, and they said, "Can we get a whole series out of this book?" And they said, "Well, we'll have to take it kind of slow." And that's my only.
Okay.
But it's really interesting just to. I'm interested in other cultures. This is a product of another.
It's nice to watch it both because you might like the story, but also to sort of compare and contrast with the American. Netflix could be really interesting.
Yeah, totally. The other thing I'll say is something I may check out because I heard about it, although the trailer was not auspicious. I was asking, this guy for, well, I guess I just came across this on Twitter. It's an animated series called Pantheon that came out a couple of years ago.
Huh.
And it's about the singularity. It's animated sci-fi. Again, the trailer did not endear me to it, but anything that speaks directly to the singularity, I may be willing to sit through. So I'll see. I'll probably have an update on that.
Would you recommend? Would you recommend? I've never watched a single episode, not seen a single scene of Devs.
Oh yeah, I like that a lot.
I've heard people talk about it as it was a masterpiece. That sounded got a little bit lost, but I know I've heard you and Mickey talk about it, and
no, I liked it a lot. It was, it had better pacing than some of these in terms of just plot development, keeping you engaged. It got into a genuine scientific issue. And I thought he handled it pretty well. The idea of the many worlds interpretation, by the way, three-body problem, the fundamental premise that they are actually using entanglement to communicate. We can get into this later, but in another episode, remind us, folks. No, the conventional interpretation of entanglement, and I have not even heard of an unconventional interpretation, but is no, and this is fundamental. Although there is such a thing as instantaneous influence across great distances through entanglement, you cannot use it to communicate. You cannot eavesdrop on a planet, for example. So I don't know.
So you're saying that part is unrealistic.
About it may be in the novel itself. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
But certainly that seemed to be the idea in the American TV series.
Yeah.
And I can elaborate on why in future episodes.
Maybe one of the questions we get will be about entanglement.
And maybe even if we don't, I will bore people by elaborating. All right. Well, Paul, thank you. Another fine episode.
Always fun. AI. We spent a lot of time on free speech. Free speech was great. Palestine, Israel demonstrations, but AI is really where
we're moving boldly into the future now, folks.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will see you next time.